The United States Senate just voted to condemn a sitting president of their own party. A total of 67 senators, including 19 Republicans, passed a resolution at 20:47 in the morning declaring that Donald Trump violated his oath of office. And this isn't some symbolic gesture or empty political posturing. This is a formal condemnation sparked by evidence so explosive that even senators who had defended him through 2 impeachments couldn't stay silent. When Republican senators who stood by this president through every scandal, every controversy, and every crisis suddenly vote against him in the middle of the night, you know something catastrophic has just rocked Washington. Hit that subscribe button right now because you won't want to miss any of the videos I release. So, what set off this unprecedented move? A leaked transcript from the Situation Room allegedly shows direct orders to use federal law enforcement against political opponents with specific instructions to fabricate evidence if necessary. Sources reviewing the audio recording claim the president's own voice can be heard, demanding that the Justice Department manufacture criminal charges against 3 sitting Democratic governors. This isn't just another political controversy or partisan dispute. Members of his own party are joining opposition lawmakers to publicly condemn a sitting president. And believe me, when 19 Republican senators break ranks like this, you know, something enormous has just detonated. It's honestly hard to believe. We're watching elected officials from both parties unite against the president in a way we haven't seen since Watergate. Here's the full picture of what's been unfolding. Tensions between the White House and Congress have been building for months, fueled by executive orders that bypassed legislative authority, conflicts with federal judges, and repeated clashes over the administration's treatment of the Justice Department. But everything escalated on January 17th when a career intelligence analyst leaked a 47-minute audio recording to the Senate Intelligence Committee. The recording, allegedly captured during a Situation Room meeting on January 3rd, documents direct presidential orders to use the FBI to target political enemies. According to 4 senators who have listened to the full tape, there were explicit instructions to plant evidence, coordinate with allied media outlets to amplify the fabricated charges, and time the arrest to coincide with primary elections in key battleground states. This wasn't about policy debates or standard political hardball. It was about weaponizing federal law enforcement for personal political vendettas. Smash that like button if this is making sense so far. Here's where it really gets serious. When members of the Senate Intelligence Committee reviewed the recording in a secure facility on January 18th, they recognized immediately that this crossed every line that exists in our constitutional system. And let's be honest for a moment. Condemnation resolutions against sitting presidents are extraordinarily rare. They don't happen over policy disagreements or partisan disputes. They happen when lawmakers believe a president has fundamentally betrayed the oath of office and endangered the republic itself. The intelligence analyst who leaked the recording, whose identity remains protected under whistleblower statutes, reportedly worked in signals intelligence for 17 years. According to sources familiar with the situation, this individual agonized over the
decision for nearly 2 weeks before concluding that constitutional duty outweighed any obligation to protect classified information. A colleague told the New York Times that the analyst believed staying silent would make them complicit in the destruction of American democracy. Here's what multiple sources say happened next. On January 19th, a bipartisan group of 23 senators held an emergency closed-door meeting after the Intelligence Committee formally authenticated the recording. The group
included 14 Democrats, 8 Republicans, and 1 independent. Sources told CBS News that Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma, a staunch conservative who had defended the president through both impeachments, emerged from that meeting visibly shaken and told reporters that what he heard made him physically ill. Lankford reportedly sat in silence for several minutes after the recording ended, then told colleagues he needed to call his wife before making any public statement. Meanwhile, Senator Angus King, the independent from Maine and a member of the Intelligence Committee, told NBC that the recording's contents represented the clearest case of presidential abuse of power he had witnessed in 50 years of following American politics. King specifically noted that unlike previous controversies where intent could be debated, this recording left no room for interpretation. The words were explicit, the orders were direct, the criminal intent was unmistakable. By the end of that 4-hour session, the group had drafted a formal condemnation resolution that would be introduced on the Senate floor that same evening. Several senators reported that drafting the resolution was one of the most difficult tasks of their careers, knowing they were about to take a historic stand against a president of their own party. The resolution obtained by the Washington Post accuses the president of deliberately subverting the Department of Justice, ordering the fabrication of criminal evidence against American citizens, and conspiring to use federal
law enforcement as a weapon against political opponents. Reporters who reviewed the full text note, the language is unusually direct and damning. The resolution specifically states that these actions constitute a betrayal of the presidential oath and a direct assault on the constitutional order. It references specific statutes that may have been violated, including 18 U.S.C. 242, which criminalizes the deprivation of rights under color of law. Drop a comment right now if you saw this coming. I read every single one.
Now things get absolutely wild. When the resolution reached the Senate floor at 11:40 p.m. on January 19th, Majority Leader John Thune initially attempted to table it, but in a stunning procedural move, 12 Republican senators joined all 47 Democrats and both independents to force a vote. That motion passed 61-39. The chamber fell into an almost surreal silence as the roll call began. C-SPAN cameras captured several senators with their heads bowed, some appearing to pray, others staring at the ceiling as if searching for guidance. The tension in the chamber was palpable. According to reporters in the gallery, you could hear the ventilation system humming because no one was speaking. Staff members lined the walls, many of them openly crying. Several senators who had served for decades later described it as the most solemn moment they had ever witnessed on the Senate floor. The bombshell moment came at 2:31 in the morning when Senator Mitch McConnell, the former majority leader who had twice voted to acquit Trump in impeachment trials, rose to speak. According to reporters in the gallery, his voice was steady but solemn as he announced he would vote yes on the condemnation resolution. McConnell told his colleagues that he had spent 38 years in the Senate defending the prerogatives of the presidency, but that this recording represented something different. He explained that ordering law enforcement to fabricate evidence against political opponents isn't executive authority, it's tyranny. The word tyranny from Mitch McConnell sent shockwaves through the chamber. Several senators gasped audibly. Senator Susan Collins of Maine was seen wiping tears from her eyes. When one of the most consequential Republican leaders of the modern era uses that word to describe a Republican president, it signals something unprecedented. The claims of partisan witch hunt collapse entirely when the accusers include senators who have defended this president through every prior controversy. McConnell continued for another 7 minutes, his voice occasionally breaking with emotion. He recounted his father's service in World War II, fighting against actual tyranny overseas. He spoke about the founders' fears of executive overreach, and he concluded by saying that some votes matter more than politics, more than elections, more than the next primary. Some votes are about whether we still believe in the Constitution we swore to defend. This isn't the first time pressure is built against a president over abuse of power. Think back to Richard Nixon during Kappa, Watergate. When the tapes revealed Nixon ordering the cover-up, Republican senators began privately telling him he had lost their support. The pressure grew so intense that senior GOP leaders went to the White House and told him he faced certain conviction. Nixon resigned 3 days later. Then there was Bill Clinton during the Lewinsky scandal. While he faced impeachment, the charges centered on personal misconduct and perjury about a private matter. The key difference is that Clinton's actions, though dishonest and inappropriate, didn't involve using federal law enforcement to manufacture evidence against American citizens. Clinton lied about personal behavior. What's alleged here is ordering federal agents to commit felonies against innocent people. Subscribe immediately if you haven't yet. This content doesn't exist anywhere else. And let's not forget the first Trump impeachment over Ukraine. Some Republicans privately expressed concern about conditioning military aid on political investigations, but publicly they maintained the president had done nothing impeachable. The party stayed unified even when evidence of the quid pro quo seemed clear to many observers. The defense then centered on claims that the president's actions, while perhaps inappropriate, didn't rise to the level of removing a president from office. Now, however, it's different. This time, 19 Republican senators publicly voted to condemn. The pattern is clear when presidents abuse power in ways that threaten the fundamental integrity of law enforcement and the justice system. Even their own party eventually reaches a breaking point. Political loyalty has limits that cannot be crossed. So, what allegedly triggered this unprecedented reaction. According to legal and constitutional experts who have reviewed detailed descriptions of the recording, the actions violated core principles that have governed American democracy since the founding. The recording reportedly captures the president's
As the mechanics mind he wimpings with a crane down, he'd be done no kinds of fighting. Livik Prometheus, find even master swine, he'd have motor prostate. And bar the theory initially stated to be in a fixed voice, issuing specific instructions to the FBI director during a Situation Room meeting. First, there were orders to open criminal investigations into Governors Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, and Gavin Newsom of California, based not on evidence of crimes, but on their political opposition. The president allegedly stated that these governors had been too effective at opposing his agenda and needed to be neutralized before the next election cycle. Second, explicit instructions to coordinate with allied prosecutors in certain states to ensure indictments would be handed down during the primary election season to maximize political damage. The recording allegedly includes discussion of specific timing with the president, suggesting that arrests should occur during televised campaign events for maximum media coverage. Third, and most damning, direct orders to plant evidence if necessary to secure convictions, including fabricated financial documents and manufactured witness testimony. According to senators who heard the
The president expressed frustration that the governors hadn't actually committed crimes and then proposed that evidence should be created to remedy that problem.
Here's the kicker. The recording allegedly includes the president stating, and I'm quoting what senators have described, that these governors need to be in handcuffs by Super Tuesday. And I don't care what you have to invent to make that happen. This wasn't a policy debate about law enforcement priorities. It was a clear attempt to turn the FBI into a political weapon. Don't go anywhere. The most explosive part is coming next. And here's what should alarm everyone, regardless of political affiliation. This isn't just about one recording or one isolated conversation. If a president can order federal law enforcement to fabricate evidence against political opponents, the entire concept of equal justice under law collapses. Once that precedent is set, every future president, whether Democrat or Republican, could use the FBI and DOJ as personal enforcement arms against anyone who opposes them. The implications for American democracy are catastrophic. This puts Republicans in Congress in a nearly impossible position. On one side, they face pressure from a base that remains fiercely loyal and sees any criticism of the president as betrayal. That means defending him regardless of the evidence, attacking the leak as illegal, and framing the entire situation as a deep state conspiracy. On the other side, they are confronting evidence that, according to their own colleagues, shows the president ordering crimes to be committed against American citizens. They now have to explain to their constituents why ordering the FBI to plant evidence is acceptable as long as the targets are political opponents. That's a position that's nearly impossible to defend. And here's the tricky part. There's no credible defense available. Either the recording is authentic, in which case the actions described are indefensible felonies, or it's fabricated, which would require believing that the Senate Intelligence Committee, career intelligence analysts, the FBI's forensic audio laboratory, and 19 Republican senators are all participating in an elaborate conspiracy against the president. Neither option offers a viable path forward for the administration. Legal and political analysts are calling this a constitutional crisis of the highest order. Lawrence Tribe, the Harvard law professor and constitutional scholar, told CNN that if the recording's contents are as described, this represents the most serious abuse of presidential power in American history. He emphasized that Nixon's crimes were largely about covering up political espionage. This would be about manufacturing criminal prosecutions of innocent American citizens. Tribe noted that the Founding Fathers specifically designed impeachment for exactly this kind of abuse, calling it the constitutional remedy for a president who transforms the machinery of justice into a weapon of personal vengeance. Do me a favor and even Jonathan Turley, the George Washington University law professor, who has frequently defended presidential authority and testified for Republicans during Trump's first impeachment, acknowledged that the allegations are extraordinarily serious. He noted that ordering the fabrication of evidence would constitute multiple federal felonies, including conspiracy to deprive citizens of their civil rights, obstruction of justice, and potentially witness tampering. Turley emphasized that no theory of executive privilege or presidential immunity could shield these actions. He told Fox News that if this recording is authentic, he could not in good conscience defend these actions, and that every constitutional scholar he knows would reach the same conclusion. A former federal prosecutor who served in the Bush administration told NBC News that if the recording is authentic, this isn't a question of impeachment, it's a question of criminal prosecution. Ordering law enforcement to manufacture evidence against political opponents isn't a gray area. It's the definition of tyranny, and it violates virtually every principle the Justice Department is supposed to uphold. The former prosecutor added that he had spent his career putting people in prison for far less serious offenses. Neil Katyal, the former acting Solicitor General under President Obama, went even further. He told MSNBC that these allegations, if proven, would represent grounds not just for removal from office, but for criminal prosecution, both during and after the presidency. He rejected any notion that a sitting president couldn't be indicted for ordering the fabrication of evidence, calling such an interpretation a perversion of constitutional principles. So let's break down what this could mean. First, the political impact is immediate and devastating. There's now a formal bipartisan condemnation from the Senate that includes nearly 20 members of the president's own party. While this resolution carries no direct legal force, its symbolic and political weight is enormous. It signals to other Republicans that breaking ranks is not only acceptable, but may be politically necessary for survival. Before this vote, many Republicans feared that any criticism could end their careers through primary challenges. Now, respected party figures have given them cover, potentially triggering a cascade of additional defections. Second, the legal implications are severe. The House Judiciary Committee has already announced it will hold emergency hearings starting January 22nd. Multiple legal experts have indicated that if the recording's authenticity is confirmed, articles of impeachment would be virtually certain, and this time the evidence would be the president's own voice ordering crimes. Unlike the previous impeachments, which relied on testimony and documents that could be disputed, this would be direct evidence that no reasonable person could explain away. Third, the implications for the Justice Department itself are profound. Career prosecutors are reportedly in turmoil. Several senior officials have already submitted resignation letters, effective immediately refusing to continue serving in administration accused of these actions. The FBI Agents Association, which represents over 14,000 active and retired agents, issued a statement expressing grave concerns about the politicization of their institution. Finally, the institutional implications are devastating. Every federal prosecutor, every FBI agent, and every career official in the Justice Network. The department is now questioning whether they can trust that investigations are being conducted for legitimate purposes. A poll of federal law enforcement officials conducted by the Federal Law Enforcement Officers Association found that 73% expressed serious concerns about the politicization of their agencies. That's a staggering number that threatens the basic functioning of American law enforcement. The damage extends beyond the Justice Department. Intelligence agencies are reportedly facing a crisis of morale. Career officers who dedicated their lives to protecting the country now wonder whether their work will be weaponized for political purposes. Recruitment for sensitive positions has reportedly stalled as potential candidates question whether they want to join agencies embroiled in constitutional controversy. State attorneys general from both parties have begun coordinating their response. A bipartisan group of 34 state AGs issued a joint statement affirming their commitment to the rule of law and promising to resist any attempt to use federal law enforcement as a political weapon against state officials. Several have indicated they are prepared to file suit if any of the threatened investigations move forward. The implications for the upcoming election cycle cannot be overstated. Every Republican candidate in every race will now face questions about whether they support a president accused of ordering the fabrication of evidence. Polling conducted overnight shows that 62% of independent voters believe the allegations are serious enough to warrant removal from office. That number represents a potentially fatal electoral liability for Republicans in swing districts. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. I'm genuinely curious to see your perspective. But beyond the immediate political fallout, this is really about fundamental constitutional principles. The president's role as chief executive includes oversight of federal law enforcement, but that authority must be exercised within constitutional limits. It demands that prosecutions be based on evidence, not political vendettas. If a president can order the FBI to fabricate evidence against political opponents, then the rule of law becomes meaningless. We're no longer a constitutional republic or something else entirely. This scenario is causing sheer panic within Republican leadership. Reports indicate that senior Republicans held emergency conference calls throughout the night of the vote. Some argued for circling the wagons and attacking the leak, claiming classified information shouldn't have been disclosed. Others insisted that the allegations themselves demanded a response, regardless of how the recording became public. The party is fracturing in real time, torn between loyalty to a president who commands their base and responsibility to address what many are calling the most serious abuse of power in American history. Meanwhile, the White House went completely dark after the vote. No statements were issued, no tweets appeared, the press secretary's phone went straight to voicemail. When reporters arrived at the White House gates at 7 a.m. on January 20th, they found no scheduled briefings and no officials willing to speak even on background. One administration official speaking anonymously told Politico that the atmosphere inside the West Wing was described as furial. Staff members were reportedly seen removing personal belongings from their offices, uncertain whether the administration would survive the week. The silence lasted for over 7 hours. Foreign allies reached out through diplomatic channels, receiving no response. The stock market opened sharply lower, with the Dow falling 847 points in the first hour of trading as investors processed the constitutional uncertainty. World leaders issued carefully worded statements expressing concern about stability in the United States. Things escalated further when the president finally responded at 9:43 a.m. with a series of posts on Truth Social. He called the condemnation vote a treasonous attack orchestrated by Democrats, rhinos, and the deep state. He claimed the recording was fabricated by his helper Pharaoh by Nest-Chain's intelligence agencies working with George Soros, and claimed the senators who voted for condemnation would face primary challenges funded by his political operation. He specifically named Mitch McConnell, calling him a fossil who should be investigated himself, and threatened that Republicans who crossed him would learn what happens to traitors. Stay with me. What comes next will completely change how you view the situation.
Here's what makes it even more extraordinary. The president's
response essentially confirmed the pattern described in the recording. Instead of addressing the substance of the allegations, the reaction was pure fury and personal attacks on fellow Republicans. When your defense is threatening the people who raised concerns rather than disputing the evidence itself, you've already lost the argument. Legal experts immediately noted that publicly threatening senators could itself constitute additional criminal exposure for witness intimidation and obstruction of congressional proceedings. This goes far beyond a single controversy. It's about whether a president can order law enforcement to manufacture evidence against political opponents without consequence. If there are no consequences for these actions, it establishes a precedent that would transform American democracy into something unrecognizable. Every future president could target journalists, activists, business leaders, or anyone who criticized them. The rule of law would exist only for those who lack political power. If this blows your mind, hit that like button right now. Here's the situation. 67 senators, including 19 Republicans, just voted to condemn a sitting president for allegedly ordering the FBI to fabricate evidence against political opponents. The White House has gone silent. Legal experts are discussing not just impeachment, but criminal prosecution. And the president's response has been to threaten the senators who voted against him rather than address the evidence itself. This is no longer just partisan politics. It's about whether we accept the use of federal law enforcement as a weapon against American citizens who commit no crime other than political opposition. When Mitch McConnell uses the word tyranny to describe a Republican president's actions, we've entered genuinely unprecedented territory. When 19 Republican senators vote for condemnation in the middle of the night, the political landscape has fundamentally shifted. If there are no consequences, it sets a precedent that would end the American experiment in constitutional government. Future presidents of either party could target anyone who opposes them with fabricated criminal charges, knowing that political loyalty would protect them from accountability. Keep a close eye on this story. The House Judiciary Committee begins emergency hearings on January 22nd. The Senate Intelligence Committee is preparing to release a redacted transcript of the recording. Sources indicate that additional recordings may exist, potentially including conversations with the FBI director and the Attorney General. And reports are emerging that several cabinet members are privately discussing the invocation of the 25th Amendment. The international reaction has been swift and alarming. NATO allies have issued statements expressing concern about the stability of American democratic institutions. The British Prime Minister called for calm and constitutional process. Germany's chancellor noted that the world is watching to see whether America's institutions can withstand this test. Even adversaries have weighed in, with Russian state media gleefully covering the chaos and suggesting that American democracy is collapsing from within. Financial markets remain in turmoil. The dollar has weakened against major currencies. Treasury yields have spiked as investors question the stability of American governance. Major corporations have paused political donations pending clarity on the situation. The Chamber of Commerce, typically a reliable Republican ally, issued a statement calling for a thorough and transparent investigation into the allegations. Military leaders have remained publicly silent, as is appropriate for unformed officers. But sources tell NBC News that Joint Chiefs Chairman General Charles Brown privately assured congressional leaders that the military remains committed to the Constitution and will not participate in any unconstitutional actions. That assurance, while routine in normal times, takes on extraordinary significance given the nature of the allegations. Before we go any further, smash that subscribe button so you never miss content like this. Here's where things stand right now. 67 elected officials just put their careers on the line, declaring that a sitting president ordered federal law enforcement to commit crimes against American citizens. The legal machinery is moving, the political coalitions are fracturing, and the White House remains silent while the president threatens anyone who dares to hold him accountable. This isn't just another news cycle that will fade away. This is a constitutional crisis unfolding in real time. What happens next could determine whether the concept of equal justice under law has any meaning in America. The evidence is out there. The condemnation has been voted. Now we wait to see if accountability still holds any weight in Washington or if we've crossed a threshold from which there is no return. The stakes have never been higher. The evidence has never been more damning, and the constitutional crisis has never been more immediate. Pause for a second and hit that like button if you're finding value in this coverage.